feedback is a gift. It is a gift, and it should be mainly in the moment unless you need to go and think about it. And if you care for the other person, again, it comes back to this concept, if it's about other people, if it's about that other person's success, if you want them to succeed, you have to give them feedback, both positive and constructive. And if you care for them, it will come through in all of your feedback, and it is absolutely a gift. And they will view you as a mentor and as a leader, and they will follow you anywhere if you will give them feedback.
Welcome to Encouraging Leaders, a podcast that exists to remind CEOs and aspiring CEOs that you do not have to lead alone. I'm Mark D. Braun, your host today, and today we're joined by a special friend, an incredible leader here in St. Louis, John Jennings. John is the President and Chief Strategist for the St. Louis Trust and Family Office, where they look over high net worth families, over $15 billion worth of assets. He's also a prolific author. One of my favorites is he writes the iFOD, which is the interesting fact of the day, large readership, and every day he's writing new concepts that I get to learn from and others do. He's also an adjunct professor, and in 2023, he released his first published book, The Uncertainty Solution, teaching people how to think differently about how they invest in life and in leadership. So, John, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, it's great.
Let's do it. Let's
do it. Let's encourage leaders not to feel like they have to be alone, right?
Right, exactly. Amen.
Well, I just think about how encouraging it was to read your book. You know, I felt like you were inside my mind. I was not alone because I was reading what I needed to hear. I think about back in your history as you went from early on, you get out of college and you start to lead, and now you're the president of a company. When did you learn that you didn't have to lead alone?
Yeah. Well, my journey is I came up as an advisor. So I was trained as a lawyer. I practiced estate planning and tax law at a big law firm and traffic tickets. Still do them. Go speeders. And then I worked at Arthur Andersen. And again, I was a wealth advisor. You know, I started having some, more junior people that I was, managing, which is kind of different than leading, Mm-hmm. and then when Andersen imploded and we started our firm, I was thrust into leadership as our firm grew. And really a turning point for me, it was in 2010. So I was 40 years old, and I had been very focused on my own career. How much money was I going to make? And I wanted to move up in the ranks of my company. I wanted certain positions. I probably wanted power. And then I did this thought experiment. It was based on, reading a few books and wanting to be a better leader. And I did this thought experiment in 2010 and was like, what if I made it not about me? And I made it about other people? And counterintuitively, like that's when my career took off, is when I focused on other people instead of myself. And it continues to this day. And again, we all care about ourselves. I'm not saying you can't be completely selfish. We're just not wired that way. But
right.
The more I focus on other people, counterintuitively, the more success I have. It's crazy.
It's so cool. And it happened at 40. It's like you made it all the way to 40 not doing that shift. Right. And tell me, what is it that is so hard to make the shift, or why does it take so long?
Well, again, I think being trained as, a technical expert, a wealth advisor, a practitioner, I didn't really have any leadership training. I started reading books on leadership. Mm-hmm. I didn't have great leader mentors because, again, I was mainly, in law firm, accounting firms. Again, amazing technical people, but
right.
Not a whole lot of, leaders. And you don't have to be inspirational. But one thing that really struck me, I don't think it was in 2010, but it was later. I read this definition of being a leader that has stuck with me ever since, and I mentor our people around this. A leader is someone who has followers. Boom. Now, maybe you'd say, well, that's a tautology. Of course, it's yes. But no, but if you think about being a leader in terms of, am I doing the sort of things that people will follow me?
Yeah.
That can be your North Star, your guiding star to how your direction on how to be a leader is, am I acting in a way that people will want to follow me? Which means you don't have to do everything on your own too, by the way.
Yeah, because you've got people following you, so that you actually have people with you. Yeah. So there's two shifts there. One is a mindset shift of a leadership. The kind of leader that I want to be is somebody that has followers. That is actually the definition of leadership. I love that one. And then the other one is the idea that I can actually focus on others instead of myself. And how does that work? And what does it look like? And that you've actually accelerated growth after that compared to before.
And it's hard. And mentoring some of our people, it's hard to say, really, for your next step in your career growth, it's going to be focusing more on other people than yourself. And it's so hard because, again, that is not how most of us are wired.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the school system gave me my grade and nobody else's grade. Like I could only pass my test. Nobody could pass my test. I was set up that it was, and it was on a curve. So if I did better than most and better than all, then I got an A. If I did worse than most or the same as most, I got a C. And I wanted A's. And so I got A's by being individually performing. And then you get out into those technical worlds. Mine's engineering, yours was wealth advisor, but there was personal gain for personal excellence. And so you just kept going.
Yeah, and you do.
Yeah. I remember my turn on the followers. I didn't have any followers, but the exercise that I did, yours was different. I did the end of life exercise where on my tombstone, what are people writing on my tombstone? I'm dead, and what are they writing? And before I turned to others focused and wanting followers, all it said was, he's pretty smart.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's all they're going to say about me.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can feel it now. I mean, I don't want that. I don't want that to be the thing that I'm known for, that he's pretty smart.
Yeah.
I want
what
different.
if it was you could be very smart on your tombstone? Would that be worth it?
It's not enough. It's not enough.
Of course, you're more than very smart. You're just being humble, saying pretty smart, which is a sign of leadership. I love it. So, that resonates with me because David Brooks, the columnist author, talks about, resume virtues versus eulogy virtues. Yes. So, along that line. And again, we get caught up thinking that the resume virtues are what's important, but it's really the eulogy virtues. And hopefully you can come to that soon enough in your career and your life that you can do something about it.
Yeah, I want as many seconds on this earth for each person. Yeah. And that's why we're talking to these CEOs. We want them to actually make those shifts if they haven't. And if they have, help them along the journey. David's book, Strength to Strength, is the one that you're talking about, I believe. Is that right?
That's Arthur Brooks.
Arthur Brooks, sorry.
I was talking about David Brooks, the New York Times columnist. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting. They both have the same concept there, trying to get to the second half of life, trying to get to the point where we're contributing back in that. So tell me about, you're a prolific writer. And why do you do that? What is that for you as a leader? What does it do for you as a person, a human, a leader?
Well, it's interesting. I majored in finance. I went to law school. I don't really have any writing training. And, I had to learn along the way and then have some great editors and people that were really willing to give me the tough, editing and just tear my stuff up. So, again, it's like, everybody wants A's, but you really need to be graded at C's and D's, out in the real world, and make those mistakes and have someone that's willing to invest in you to kind of take it to the next level. For me, I've always looked at writing as a way to clarify my own thinking. So I love to research on, various, personality or, tests. I went through like 8 hours of testing before I became president. I think they were trying to see, what about this guy? Can he, could he possibly lead this firm? But, I was 98th or 99th percentile in need for understanding. So I love to dig into things. But I'm like, if I'm going to dig in and I'm not going to share them, then why? And then it clarifies my thinking. I feel like until I write about something, I can't really understand something because you learn so much when you try to organize. You see holes in your thinking.
Yeah.
And then if you put it out there, there's a vulnerability. So you need to know what the other arguments are. Right. Yeah. So it just gives me an entirely different world perspective. And in terms of my blog, and I write for Forbes and even my book, like it's kind of silly to say, but I don't really do it for, clicks or anything. It's really more for, clarifying my thinking.
Yeah. So you had so many pieces to that share. So the strong mentors and coaches in your life that would be radically candid with you and tell you the hard truth about and correct, not just cheer for you. You needed that, and I need that in my life. I found it so critical that I have people that will just speak directly and say, that's not the way, this is the direction. Here, you say you want this, go this direction. I love that. And then clarifying your thinking, the simple idea there is that I use it all the time in my coaching. If somebody is unclear, I just say, write it and send me a one-page writing on it.
Amen.
Or after the problem is, I say, write a one-page summary of what you learned. And if they will do it, it will change all of the clarity in their mind because they're verbally processing it, but it's not getting any clearer. And so that's such a simple idea for our listeners. If you have a problem out there and you're wrestling with it, just write so that you can clarify your own thinking.
Totally. And then the thing about that too, in terms of, getting hard writing advice, and partly this was hiring people to rip apart my stuff, which was so great. And it's not like I'm a gifted or talented writer, but I'm a lot better than I used to be. I read my old stuff and I'm like, ooh, dog roll, But I think there's this viewpoint which is so important, both being a leader, but then conveying this to others in your organization, is feedback is a gift. It is a gift, and it should be mainly in the moment unless you need to go and think about it. And if you care for the other person, again, it comes back to this concept, if it's about other people, if it's about that other person's success.
Yeah.
If you want them to succeed, you have to give them feedback, both positive and constructive. And if you care for them, it will come through in all of your feedback, and it is absolutely a gift. And they will view you as a mentor and as a leader, and they will follow you anywhere if you will give them feedback. And this is the hardest thing we get for our younger people to do, because they feel like, oh, I'm not being nice to them. And even the editors I use, like I just gave a chapter of my new book to my editor, and I worked with her on the prior book, and she sends back, and she had some really tough comments for me. She was like, you're going to your safe space, which is talking about research, and you have too much talking about research. It reads too much like a term paper. And I responded, I'm like, thank you. You are so correct. I went back and read it. She's like, oh, I'm so glad you liked my feedback. I was worried that I hurt your feelings. I'm just like, damn it. Like, you have worked with me long enough that was a gift that you gave me, because I want it to be good, right? I don't want you to say, oh, you got an A. It's okay. This was like B-, maybe even C+ that I gave her. And now I'm going back to the drawing board on it, right?
Right.
And that it is such a gift if you care about the other person, which you should. I think that's one of the key leadership lessons that I learned, and it's hard, but then you get used to it. Right?
Well, I mean, if you think about your own story, it took you to 40 to understand a shift to other focused instead of self-focused. And really that's where a lot of leaders haven't made that shift yet. And so when they're giving feedback, they actually don't care yet about the other human. And so they're really actually caring about the results that they're getting, and they're frustrated or embarrassed by the results that I'm getting. And so I'm giving you feedback, but I'm not giving it for you. I'm giving it for mine. And so I think that's really powerful. Question one is, do you care about the other human?
Yes.
And then, yes, okay. And then go give the feedback as clearly as you can with candor. There's a great book called Radical Candor that just talks about those two in a 2x2 grid. Do you care? Because if you can, then you have to give the feedback, and then you can give the feedback. I really love that. And you're trying to get younger leaders to do that work. Mm-hmm. How do you find helping them to care? Or do you find that one easy?
I think they do care. It's just a matter of focus. I think they think getting ahead is them making A's, right? And it's a mind shift to say, my success isn't so much me making A's; it's helping other people make A's, right? Yeah. So it's really more of a focus. I mean, we hire good people that do care. It's just, and I cared, prior to being 40, I did care. It just my focus was, over 50%, quite a bit over 50% on myself. And I think it's less than 50% now, and maybe it's still more than 50%. But the point is, I'm trying. I try every day, and it's about, it's about the people in my company. It's about my clients. It's about friends. It's, I'm trying to do that. And I know I'm not going to be 100% successful, but at least I'll move the needle some, right?
Yeah, you're focused on that instead of the other. I want to move to this mental mindset discussion. You have such a great job of laying out in your uncertainty solution. You're thinking about how people think about, instead of thinking about the actual problem, how do they think about problems? Talk to me about either one of your favorite mental models in that book, or how you came to that. Talk to me about mental models.
My book is called The Uncertainty Solution, as you mentioned, but the subtitle is How to Invest with Confidence in the Face of the Unknown, which makes it sound like, it's really just about investing or how to invest. And it's interesting. My now 25-year-old daughter, who has a master's in English, so very much a words writing person, she read the book when it was a draft and made some comments early on, not because she wanted to read the book. It's because she's my daughter. And she's like, oh yeah, I'll read my dad's book. Right. It's interesting. After she finished it, she said, Dad, this was not an investment book. There was some investing, but so it's really about how to see the world through this concept of mental models with an investment bent. But so many of the things in the book aren't only applicable to investing, at all. So it's about how to view the world through, a different sort of lens. And the challenge of the book, and I'm proud of how it turned out, but the challenge was to write about things that could be pretty technical in a way that was completely non-technical and mostly stories, right? So I'll give you an example. One of my chapters is called the trivial many versus the vital few. And if I just said, okay, well, here's what it's about. It's about the differences of power law distributions and bell curves and a little bit of fractal geometry thrown in. You'd be like,
exciting topics.
I never want to read this book, but it's interesting. It's such an important thing to know, way beyond investing when things, because we're used to things following our expectations and bell curves, but so much in life actually follows a power law distribution. So, I start the example like this, and this is a true story. So years ago, I interviewed a guy, and I looked at his resume, and I saw that he played D1 basketball at a powerhouse basketball school. So I expected him to be tall. But I go in, and he was sitting down. And you tell he's very tall sitting down. But he stands up. He just went up and up and up and up. So he was 7'2". I'd never met someone that tall in person. Like, I'd been to a basketball game and seen him on the court.
Right.
I'd never seen someone in person. Like, it was stunning.
Right.
So the median height of an American male is 5'9", which is what I am. So that's 17 inches taller.
Yes.
So like
a world above.
Like, it is like ridiculous.
Right.
Like ridiculous. And it just like stunned me. So later that week, I went to a concert here in St. Louis, a place called The Pageant. There was about, 1,000 people there. It was Modest Mouse, so like young hipsters. And so if the average net worth in the US is about $100,000, which would be a bit much for these hipsters. And anyway, I saw someone there that I knew was a member of a family that's one of the richest families in St. Louis that has billions of dollars. And by her walking into the concert with 1,000 people with an average net worth of $100,000, she brought the average from $100,000 to $1 million. Let's say she's worth $1 billion.
Yeah.
So the thing is if this guy that was 7'2" walked in, everybody would gawk, but he would raise the average height by 0.01 inches. So that's the difference. So height, even though he is 17 inches taller, that's not that big of a difference because height follows a bell curve. It's like within expectations. And he was, 2.5 standard deviations. So you're like, oh, that's crazy, right? But wealth follows a power law distribution. And it's so important to know where in life things follow one versus the other, especially in investing. And so my book is things like that.
Yeah, no, you do a great job of breaking down complex topics, statistics, power laws into something that could be consumed and used. I think about leadership and having to do that over and over again, because sometimes we have this complex system thought in our head, but we actually have to make it approachable to everybody that's following. So that exercise that you're doing, which you did so well in that book, how did you learn the importance of simplification to get it to story? Or where did you learn how to tell stories to do it?
Yeah. So, I'm a big reader. I usually read 60, 70, 80, 100 books a year. It's kind of split between fiction and nonfiction. And I started becoming I thought about 10 years ago. In fact, 2013 is when I first put together a outline sort of what my book ended up being. It took a long time to actually sit down and actually decide I was going to write it. And it took a lot of therapy too, with my therapist to actually write it. But I started noticing which nonfiction books I loved and the characteristics. And then I read, 10, 12, 14 books on writing a book. Mm-hmm. And again, the advice was, unless you're writing for an incredibly technical audience, it needs to be mainly about stories. In fact, then I read a book. I read a book just about stories and why we've evolved as a species to pay attention to stories. So I was like, okay, it's got to be story, because that's what we relate to, not preach. And then I noticed some books. In fact, I had someone who I really respect, who's just phenomenal investment guru, and he had a book, and he asked me to be a pre-reader of it, and I read it. And I agreed with everything in the book, and grammatically and everything, it was well written, but it was a slog. It was so boring. And again, it was like you were preaching it. He was like, old school, high school lecture, right?
Yeah.
And again, and I was fortunate, and I gave him some of that feedback because again, feedback's a gift, and he appreciated it, and he put in a lot more stories, but still not enough to make it interesting. But it was so fortuitous that I read that book right when I was starting to write mine, and I was like, I know I don't want it to be like that, so I've got to go the 180 degree.
Yeah. So power of story. You did a lot of reading to do it. It resonates with you. The history of human development. I've watched, if you think about the texts that have made it thousands of years, they're all stories. And so it's like, how did they make it that long? They made it by story.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's so powerful. I've taken 3 intensive courses on storytelling just because it's so powerful. I'm just like, how do you do it better? How do you do it better? And watching for it and learning how to do it. And I just think it's such a powerful lesson in leadership, not just in book writing.
If I started telling you a story, if I said, okay, there was this kangaroo and he hops into a bar and he goes up to the bartender and he said, I like to order a drink. The bartender hands him a menu. He orders a drink and the bartender goes, you know what? We don't get many kangaroos in here. And the kangaroo says, yeah, at $20 a drink, I bet you don't. Anyway, it's a joke, but it's a story. And
it is.
And I'll tell you, like, we perk up when someone starts to tell us a story. And your listeners, like, once I tell a story, maybe they're like, oh, Mark and John are blah, blah, blah. But once you start to hear a story, that's when you perk up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just thinking about that in terms of feedback as a gift, any stories that come to mind for you where you learned that or could help somebody else learn that? Because it's such a powerful lesson.
Okay, so when I was at Arthur Andersen, and I'm sorry, this is I'm gonna. It's almost going to sound braggy, but it is absolutely a story, and it changed part of it, and then it changed my life. Okay, so I was this lawyer, very technical in tax and estate planning and trust and everything. I'm working at Arthur Andersen. I've been there like 18 months, and I have a performance review with the head of the tax division. So first of all, like this guy, Bob Marinda is his name. He did everybody at manager level and up, which was so many people. He did the review.
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh, like crazy, right? So I go and I have this review with him, and here's what he says. He's like, Jennings, like you are so smart. You're technical. Your memos are great. Your research is great. You may be one of the best, if not the best, technical tax people I have ever worked with. But if you continue on the path that you are now, you will never make partner. And that's fine. You'll have a successful career. You'll make plenty of money, but you will never be partner, because partners at Arthur Andersen are client service people. They lead people. They bring in business. And you need to decide which route you want to take, because I think you can be more than just a technical person. And he goes, don't answer now. I want you to go think about it, and let's have lunch in 2 weeks. And like, it would have been so easy for him just to give me a review saying, you're great technically, you're doing great, you're valuable, because I was all those things. And so what I do is I used to do it for every year until he told me to stop. But I email him every year and thank him when I'm doing reviews of other people. And then when I'm doing reviews, and I do a lot of reviews, I because it's important, but I think about Bob Marinda and that gift of that feedback, because it changed the entire course of my career. I would not be at my company, president of a company, and I'm not that technical anymore.
It's such a beautiful story. So, he basically shared with you that he cares, he sees you, you have strengths, here they are. And if you keep going the path that you're going, you won't get what I believe you're capable of. I see potential in you up here, and you will not get there if you don't adjust. That is, a beautiful example. Amazing example of a leader giving feedback because they care, showing it in their words, showing it in their actions, asking for follow-up. And I love the last piece is you have a decision to make, and don't make it now, because it's a big one and it's going to change how you move. And so come back to me.
Well, and all that technical was like, that was my comfort spot. And I see this all the time. So we have 65 people here, and I think we have like 10 or 12 or 13 high school valedictorians. And I can't totally stereotype all of them, but I will tell you that they tend to like to make A's.
Yes.
And so when they're really good at something, sometimes it's hard to get them to do things they're not good at.
Correct.
And that's fine if they're happy just doing that, but they're not going to have the same amount of growth. And you've got to stretch. And kind of what Bob was saying is you need to stretch. Like, I was only doing stuff that I knew I was good at.
Yeah.
without exploring all these other things that are much harder. I mean, it's quite frankly, it's easy to be technical. If your brain's wired a certain way, but it's much harder to go and do those in tangible things. And oh my gosh, it's like, thank you, Bob, for this feedback, which had to be hard to give. And then to your point, you said it perfectly. He saw me.
Yeah.
And he probably did 40 performance reviews, yet he actually spent the time and thought about me and gave me tough feedback. Amazing.
Yeah. I call that a coach. I call him what he was doing coaching. I had my first one. It was Bruce Farble sat me down 6 months in, a chemical engineer, and he said, "You're really smart. Your ideas are great. And if you don't change, you will not make it." And I was like, I'm with you. Looking back, it changed my entire trajectory. I would have gone technical, but I went people instead because of him.
You came up through engineering, and then you led a company, and now you're doing leadership coaching.
And it's because of him. And the point is, he was willing to see me and say, that's not it. And everybody else in my past had said, you got an A, you're really smart. And I said, thanks. And then I'm like, what am I supposed to? They said, you should do more homework. I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, I got the A, you gave me the test. That's not it.
Yeah.
They didn't see me, but he saw me and he said, I need you to do more. I think you can. Yeah. Feedback is a gift. If we could get that one idea across to these people that are listening, feedback is a gift. Figure out how to get feedback in your life, and that would change everything about it. And then figure out how to give feedback, which is the other side of that. You were able to get before you gave. Talk to me about the order there. How do you help people receive feedback as a gift?
Oh, okay. So thank you for asking that. Here's how I think about it in my head. I don't know if I should call it this out in the world, but when I start working with someone, I think of it as, okay, so my dad has horses, and so I ride horses with him. And of course, the horses are very trained, so it's not like I'm going and breaking horses. But I think about it sort of like that. Like, you need to get the person, again, this sounds horrible, to take the bridle. So I start with lavishing it's legit, but lavishing positive feedback.
Yeah.
And again, this is a certain habit too, because somebody will do a good job at something and you're used to just maybe not saying anything. So like somebody does a good job going and saying, that was really good. I really liked how you did this. But get them to know that you care and that you're going to give a lot of feedback. Mm-hmm. And then you can start peppering in that constructive criticism, because if all you give is the constructive criticism, that's kind of demoralizing as well. I mean, there's something called it depends on where there's two different ratios, the Gottman ratio, the Losada ratio, the amount of positive versus negative, and their difference for spouses versus kids and others. But basically, it's kind of like a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions you need to have with someone, and hopefully more to have a great relationship. So again, feedback's a gift, but it shouldn't just be, you need to do better at this, you need to do better at that. And you got to celebrate. Like I literally, like when somebody does something great, especially like I love it, like when they can correct me on something, because I think a lot of myself. And when somebody goes and is like, oh, that wasn't great, or we could do it better, like I get so excited. I'm just like, oh my God, that is so great. You kicked so much ass. You're making us look better. You saved me from a mistake, or you improved something I did. So you got to have like enough of your own self-confidence.
Yep.
And that helps it be about the other person. It's like, okay, we're going to help them be great for them, help their career, and get excited when they do great. So then when they're not so great, they understand that you have their best interest at heart. So again, take the bridle, and then later maybe you can use the spurs. Yeah,
I love it. I've used the Mustang often. So if I only hire really capable people, and so they're freaking hard. They're like a Mustang, and they're running fast.
Yeah.
And so whether it's bridle or giving them praise, one of the ways that I give them praise is to tell them, you're a Mustang, and right now you're running all over the place, but you are strong and capable. And all we're working on is fine tuning how you actually go where you want to go.
Great analogy.
The piece that I'm just breaking these things down that you shared. One is keep it positive, which I just count into making sure that you're earning trust, that you're doing that early and often, and keeping the ratios higher than lower. The second one is modeling, taking negative feedback yourself and turning it to positive, and which you're doing all the time. You're already saying it. Feedback is a gift. And whenever they give you feedback, you're demonstrating it so that they see what I take feedback as. And then the one that you shared in the last story, which is the idea that I'm calling you I'm reviewing your behavior, not at your current level, at what I see as your potential, which is I see your potential as partner, and I'm reviewing your behavior based on that instead of your current role. Yeah. And so I think that's, such a powerful piece of the puzzle for me. If you can see them as a future potential and then give feedback on that.
And as they move up in their career, like as you move up, being effective or successful becomes more and more intangible. Like when you're younger, it's more the technical. And are you doing a good job with this and that? Is your spreadsheet good? Did you draft a good trust? Did you, if it's engineering, did you do, your engineering thing correctly?
Right.
But further on in the career, it becomes more and more intangible, which requires more and more mentoring and help and that sort of relationship where you're really kind of investing in that, investing in that person.
That's so good.
So we were talking about horses. So this horse walks in the bar. I have a whole series of jokes on bars. So this horse walks into this bar, and he walks up. The bartender looks up and says, "Hey," and the horse said, "Yes, please."
You keep them. You can remember them.
Yeah.
I can't remember jokes. How do you remember them? Practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Reps.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. Anything else about your book or the next book that you're coming out with or writing right now that you want to share with our group?
Yeah, the next book's about wealth and happiness. So I'm super excited. I have this career where, I've advised families of great wealth for our firm. We work pretty much basically in the $50 to $500 million space. Some are above, some are below, but that's kind of our sweet spot. So, I've worked with these families of great wealth, and I've seen what wealth does and also doesn't do, and the opportunities, but also the pitfalls. So I've been a kind of a student of wealth and happiness for a long time. I've done a lot of research. I've read 40-ish books kind of related to this. I've read 200 plus research papers. So it's really, taking it. So it's not just my impressions, even though my impressions, come into it, but, like 25 years, one person working with, from start to finish, I don't know, a few hundred families isn't enough real data points, nor can I see inside of my client's head. So I can't be like, oh, this is what makes you happy and this is what it doesn't. But I do have my impressions. So yeah, I'm super excited about this book. I hope it helps, a lot of people focus on the right things that they can increase their own sense of life satisfaction and especially parenting, because parenting has become such a, especially for, people of a certain socioeconomic status, it's become this competitive sport. And I want to, kind of help people in that sort of area as well, in terms of some parenting. If you're doing well, you're successful, you're fluent. Some tweaks maybe to how you help your kids focus.
So I don't know if everybody listening has 50 to 500 million today, but I know that everybody's business leaders and they're working on leadership, and many of them are parents. And so if you think about anything there that you'd like to share with this group, takeaways or findings or something from you on how wellness and health come about, what pieces make it so?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I haven't written the book on the part of the book on the parenting yet, but basically it's interesting working with these families. I think there's a few things to get right first before you even totally focus on the kids. And number one, have your own mental health and substance abuse house in order. So I think if you have the money and the time, having a therapist that you go to every month or every other month or whatever helps you be a better communicator, better in relationships, and maybe a better parent. So that's number one. Number two, be intentional about what your own values are and live them. And if you do those two things and you model that, and you have healthy, positive relationships, if you're married, that's positive. You're healthy with friends. If your own relationship with money is pretty good, you have great values, your kids will see that. And that's the most important thing. Like, yes, financial planning or education matters, trusts matter, all that other stuff matters. But those are the most important things. And then, you read what to expect when you're expecting, at least the guys do, but definitely the women tend to, but there's no instruction manual later. And most people don't read books on like how to be a good parent, and, early on, through almost happenstance, my wife and I went to a series of classes where we were taught to be better parents. And we were like, oh my gosh, and again, I don't think it definitely didn't, just, all of a sudden add water make us better parents. But I think, then if you're a good parent, and there's some basic things around being a good parent. Yeah. And then it's the wealth and everything else. But part of it is not getting caught in the rat race of allowing your child just to be sucked into the competitive nature. And it's fascinating. There's this researcher, her name is Sonia Luthar, and she started at Columbia University. She's at like ASU now, but her specialty, she's a sociologist, and her specialty was at-risk kids. Mm-hmm. So like 20, 25 years ago, she was doing this study, and she needed controls for her low socioeconomic, like kids in poverty. So some of the high schools that she was surveying were very high, like high achieving private high schools. And then she got the data back and she's like, this cannot be right. She looked and she saw that the kids at the high achieving schools, they're called HASs now, high achieving schools, they were scoring lower than the kids in poverty on things like substance abuse, delinquency, anxiety, and depression.
Mental health factors.
Yes. She was like, are you kidding me? Yeah. So she's made this over the last, 2+ decades, her life's work, and has done all these other studies. And as a result of her studies, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the largest health foundation in the world, the Department of Health and Human Services, have labeled at-risk kids, those low socioeconomically and those at high-achieving schools. The problem is the parents at the schools, which is all of us, and then the problem is the schools themselves and the students, where what they are focused on isn't necessarily what's best for them. It's all about, I want activities and grades and things so I can get in the best college possible, because if I get in the best college possible, I'm going to go on and make a lot of money, or I'm going to be a lawyer or a surgeon or work at McKinsey. And great, if that's truly what you want to be. But they get on this path.
The track, yes.
You get on this track and on this path, and it might be good to step back. But when everybody in your social group and everybody at your school is all focused on this, and everybody's taking the ACT prep classes and needing to get this, it's just, you can almost, if you break away from that, it's like coming out of a fever dream.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the two things you started with, which is make sure your own personal mental health and substances are in line and order, and then make sure that you're clear about what you value and values and live accordingly. Those two go across everywhere, everything, leadership at a business, leadership of a team at any level, and leadership of family in the parenting relationships and marriage. And so it's just, that stuff just resonates so much. And then the other thing that I hear very clearly is intentionality. Be intentional of improving your roles in your parenting role and in your leadership role, and just be intentional so that you're not just happenstance and you're not just doing it ad hoc, and you're actually knowing that you have a role to play and you can improve it.
Amen.
So those two for me are huge takeaways from that. Anything, if you go back to your first step in, anything you want to leave this group with as far as what you would like them to know, or what you would have liked somebody to tell you earlier in your career? These are young presidents and CEOs, and would love for them to have any insight that you want to share.
If I could go back to an earlier self, like, I don't know, my 20s or early 30s, I'd be like, just don't take things so seriously. Probably only live once, and I'll get caught up in things that probably aren't the most important. It's best just not to take things seriously, and people are attracted to people that are fun and not too serious. Even if it's like, oh, we lost a client, or we didn't get this big deal or that deal, or an important employee. Yeah, it's upsetting, give yourself a little stress. And then just like in the grand scheme, it's fine. Along with life. Yeah. So I think, I meet a lot of people that are super successful that are just like serious.
Yeah.
I'm just like, that sounds no fun.
Well,
you don't want to be this like super successful, stressed, no fun person, which, by the way, is what I was becoming when I was a lawyer. My wife helped me pull the ripcord. She's like, you have no personality anymore. You need the practice of law is not for you, Jennings. I was like, okay.
Yeah. Otherwise, you'll be too serious all your life. So I absolutely love the recommendation of don't take yourself too seriously. I know I need that one. This last time with my wife, I just had a target of being playful. Be more playful and don't take yourself so seriously.
Yeah.
If there's anything that we can do to help you, you can find a time at encouragingleaders.com to set a 15-minute time with me. Would be happy to talk about leadership or life, or find out what you're doing. And John, thank you so much for your time.
Let me promote my blog website. It's mjennings.com. We'd love to have you as a subscriber. In the menu, it's the iPod, the interesting fact of the day. Or if you want to check out the book, you can find a link there. Or if not, that's great too. I'll tell you, the book, looks great on a shelf.
And where they can get the book at johnmjennings.com.
Or Amazon.
Or Amazon or anywhere.
Barnes & Noble, whatever, yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much, John.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, bye.